Yeah, definitely nervous. And then on the drive here, I was on the phone with Ram, and he tells me that, I'll just listen to your share on YouTube. And I was like, shit, what do you mean my share is going to be on YouTube? And then I started freaking out even more. But when I sit in this room and I sit in a meeting with people that are just like me, and have the same disease, I do feel calm. I feel quite calm now, and I just have one story to tell. So I suppose I'll start at the beginning. I grew up in a very ordinary, normal, functioning home. Two great parents, a younger brother, and I had pretty much everything growing up. I wasn't short of anything. But I still always wanted more, I was never satisfied, never fulfilled. From a very young age, I remember comparing my life to others. If someone had more than me, then I'd want that. The jealousy, the judgment, all of that from a very young age. I believe I was born with this disease, and I can trace back times where I can identify this disease from a very young age. Obviously after coming into this program. For me in the beginning, I went to like a really prestigious private primary school, and the first thing for me that I remember of my disease is like kind of comparing. There were people that maybe had a lot more than me, or it looked that way, and for me it was always like about fitting in and comparing and needing to stand out. I also at a very young age got diagnosed with ADHD. I started Ritalin at a young age, and I think my mom changed a bit as well after that, because she started being really hard on me when it came to like my schoolwork and my religious classwork. And I have a lot of memories like as a kid of her like sitting over me doing my homework, and she would hit me sometimes, like I'd get a hiding. I think I made it a lot bigger in my head, because for a long time I carried that as I was abused as a kid. But some of the hidings were severe, but I don't think it was anything to the extent that I had made it up in my head. I also remember being really resentful as a kid. I remember like being resentful to anyone who kind of got in the way of my affirmation or anything. Like I'd feel this like strong resentment from the time I was a kid, and I'd like make up these scenarios in my head. Like where I'd kind of be triumphant against the people that I was resentful of. Like I have memories of this as a child, and I also have a lot of memories of being extremely fearful. There'd be nights where I'd be up all night, like just really fearful. And there were two mums that I remembered. The one that I thought like would give me a hiding, but also the one that would kind of read to me every night and come and sit with me when I was feeling that fear. I think my first addiction was definitely lying. Like to change my reality. One of the first lies I remember was like when I was in this primary school and it was time to go to high school, and all my friends were kind of going to Hilton or Michaelhouse, and my parents couldn't afford that, and that's okay. But I would make like these plausible but untrue kind of lies, telling them that no, I have religious classes and I can't board, and like I'd lie just to change my reality, and it was really complicated for me, because then like I'd get afraid, when my parents are with my friends, and what's going to be said where, and if I'm going to be, kind of exposed, and it was just unmanageable. Right? Anyway, I went to high school, and high school was a lot bigger than my primary school. I needed to fit in. I relate a lot when members speak about the masks, like I had that from a very young age as well, like I could get along with absolutely anyone, from different backgrounds, different cultures, different races, different interests, and like I speak about this like my brother used to say, like I have a superpower, like I can adapt to any person's personality, or I could get on with anyone. But the truth is, like I would change my entire personality just to feel liked, or to be able to get on with someone or feel a part of, And I also like, for me, fitting in was important. Like always needed to fit in, and I used my dad's reputation quite a bit at that point. Like as my high school progressed, my dad's a medical doctor, and he started doing well, and he started getting successful, and I used that, like I rode off that reputation a lot. I come from a small town, a small community, and I rode off that quite a bit to to kind of fit in and feel important, you know, because as an addict, or as an alcoholic, sorry, I need that sense of approval, you know, and I need to be the center of attention. High school was difficult as well. I was doing religious classes. My day was like basically 4:30 in the morning. I'd go to religious classes, straight from there to school. After school, back again in religious classes from 3 to 6, you know, and that was right up to the end of matric. I did really well in school, but not as well as I should have done. You know, like the first consequence I feel of my disease was in my matric year. I got into my first proper relationship, and I was obsessed, and I kind of dropped everything else. You know, I don't know if it was the pressure of matric as well. Now that I know about the disease, you know, because as an alcoholic, like I just get fearful when something big comes up. But yeah, I mean, I did decently well in school, but I didn't get into medicine, and that was kind of a dream of mine. I think, like I feel like that was the first consequence of my addiction. But yeah, I still did pretty well in school, and at the end of matric, I had this huge ceremony because I completed my religious classes, you know, and it was like huge. My parents threw this huge ceremony with like hundreds of people, and all the attention was on me, and I loved it, you know. I love it, you know. I love it when the attention is on me. I love the sense of achievement, not because I have the sense of achievement, because I love other people seeing how good Zubair can be, you know. Anyway, I then went to study in Cape Town. I hadn't picked up any substance up to that point, and I went to study at UCT, and in my first year, that's when it all started, you know. And from the beginning, I did not drink and use like a normal person did. You know, for me, I do remember the first time I drank alcohol, and it was like, the way I related it, for me, it was like in that university setting where it was a social scene, and I remember like, I remember before starting to drink, you know, like that fear that I'd have, or that self-consciousness in person, where like something that stands out for me is like, that time I think we had Mix It, and like I'd be this like charismatic, charming person over Mix It, you know, and when I met someone in person, like I was just the self-conscious, fearful person, you know, always stuck in my head. And the first time I had a drink, it took all of that away, you know. I thought it made me a better person. I thought it made me speak better. I thought it made me act better. It just took away that fear, and I thought it made me live, you know. I also picked up substances at that point. And yeah, my first 2 years at UCT were an absolute blast. You know, I'm not going to lie. Like the beginning of my active addiction, you know, and it was just the beginning. It was extremely fun. You know, I had not much responsibility. I had the responsibility of like going there and getting a degree. You know, but like I didn't think of it that way. Like as an alcoholic, I was just flippin' entitled, and I just thought everything was going to fall into place. And in my first 2 years, like I barely went to campus. Just spent most of my time drinking and using. You know, just getting money from my parents with like rubbish lies about textbooks. Like my parents obviously weren't very accountable, because I had like new textbooks every 4 days. I think it was crazy. But in those 2 years, I managed to pass, and that was because I cheated my way through it. And like I remember from a very early age, like if I needed to, or I'm sorry, from early age, but from the beginning of my active, if I needed to cheat and I needed to pass, like it wasn't a problem for me to compromise my dignity. You know, like I'd go and beg someone to like let me copy them, or I didn't really care what other people thought in that sense. You know, when I was desperate, like I could just, you know, give up my dignity quite easily. Yeah, so my first 2 years were really fun. In my third year at UCT, like it got just unmanageable, you know. I started getting depressed. I didn't leave my flat much. I discovered online poker, and I'd play for like 12 hours a day, like literally. I wouldn't go to campus at all. I started balding like really early. I don't know, I should mention this, because I didn't react to it like a normal person does, you know. Like I was just fearful, like I wouldn't go anywhere without a cap. And like my life was just terrible, you know. From 2009, I used to say it was the worst year of my life, and that's what I thought, until like, you know, it just gets worse and worse. Anyway, at the end of 2009, I got excluded from UCT. I called my dad. I remember calling my dad, and he was like, you know what, listen, yeah, everyone deserves a second chance. Like, don't worry, chill, we're going to fight this, and you can come back. And I went down to Pietermaritzburg, and I appealed this exclusion, and I was successful. But I decided, you know what, I've just got to change. You know, now I know, like, it was my version of a geographical, but I decided that I need to come back to Pietermaritzburg. It'll be a more controlled environment, and maybe I can achieve something. You know, I'd had 3 years of being independent, and I realized, not independent, but being alone, and I realized how, how ridiculous I am in terms of managing freedom. I got back to UKZN in 2010, and like my first year was awesome again. Like I was back amongst people that I knew. I had my family's reputation. I could fit in, or thought I could fit in. And yeah, I remember a friend telling me, like, don't come back here. Like the using scene's like really bad. They started using something like in the community, like this. I don't know, this, like, it's supposed to be a prescription drug, but it's more like a black market one. And I said, you know what, I'll never do this. Like I thought I'm never going to go and do like hard stuff. That's not me. And that's the story of most of my active. Just saying I'm not going to do something until I ended up doing it. Well, it didn't take long till I started this thing. It was described to me as something that you just take and it'll give you confidence, and it is actually a freaking sleeping tablet, and it's just insane. But anyway, I started taking these things, and that's what it did give me in the beginning, that freedom from self, from my head, and yeah, I mean, for the next couple of years, I did manage to graduate at UKZN somehow, in those 2 years from me coming there to graduating, like from me starting the substance, which I feel like I had two substances of choice, and alcohol as well. But from the time I started, the progression just got like worse. It just got worse and worse. Like I started stealing. I started stealing early on from starting to use this drug. And in the beginning, like stealing, it was just like, for me, I was like just excited about it. It was like a couple $100 at a time. I'd just go to my dad's briefcase and take it, and like I thought it was exciting. Like I thought I just had new income. I felt entitled to it. There wasn't much shame and guilt that came from that initial stealing. It was more relief that I have money to use more. And yeah, I mean that final year that I graduated was absolutely ridiculous. By that time I was taking about 10 or 12 pills a day. I was using it to study. I don't know how. Like it's supposed to give you short-term memory loss. It was actually 3 years. Sorry, I failed my second year at UKZN, and that was my attitude. Like I just had this completely entitled attitude that everything's going to fall into place, or my parents are going to be there, or I was never serious about my future and about achieving anything. But I, like in my mind, I had this amazing dream, and thought it was definitely going to happen, with my entitledness, and just thought everything was going to fall into place. But to put in actual work, nothing. Like I can't put in hard work. I can when I'm desperate, and I feel that's how I got my degree. And yeah, for those few months before, I just studied. Yeah, I studied my ass off, and I somehow managed to graduate. I still remember the day I got the call, or I checked my results on my phone, and like I completely broke down. Like my dad thought something was wrong with me. Like I was bawling my eyes out. And I think it's because at that point I knew that there's something wrong with me. The way I was using. I remember at one point this like drug of choice for me wasn't available on the market, and like the price was like 3 or 4 times the price, and I still went and bought it, and I wrote a letter in my wallet saying that like you're really in trouble and you need to just like get a grip on yourself and stuff. I don't think I looked at that letter again, but I think at that point I knew something was wrong. And when I graduated, it was just for me, it was like, this is a fresh start, maybe there's hope. At that point, I still had friends, I still had a family who didn't really know much about what was going on. And I thought everything was going to be okay. I actually did really well when I graduated. I like came in the top 10 in the class, and it was insane. I really have no idea how that happened. And the next year I got into honors, and I figured, okay, like everything's going to be fine. Because at that point, everyone else was kind of moving on with their lives. People were graduating, people were getting good jobs. And people were moving on, and I thought, okay, you know what, like I've lost these few years, but I'm going to be okay. My approach to honors was absolutely ridiculous, it was just so like I thought, I've graduated, like I just need to reward myself, like I think for that next year I did absolutely nothing, just using got worse, drinking got worse. At that point, things at home were getting really bad as well, because my mom is like, she's really controlling, and she's really, like she needs everything to be done properly. And I wouldn't wake up in the morning. Obviously, I was living at home now, and I wouldn't wake up in the morning to go to campus and she'd come and wake me up, and I'd be like in a dwell from the night before, and she'd call my dad from the surgery, and he'd have to come, and my behavior wouldn't be okay. And at that point, like, my aggression was out, and I was just screaming and swearing, and I was just a really ugly person to be around. And my mom did suspect something, but for my dad, like, I was his golden boy, and I probably wouldn't do anything wrong, in his eyes anyway. Like, as an alcoholic, I had that outgoing personality as well. So my entire life, I was like that, bubbly person in the family, and everyone kind of expected things from me, and a bright future. It seemed like I had a bright future, and it was kind of falling apart at that point. In my honors year, like, I spent that entire year, like, my mom would wake me up, it would be a morning battle, and then I'd go straight to like a gambling tote, where I'd just sit and drink there the whole day, I'd use there the whole day, and I'd just gamble there. And at that point, I was stealing more. I started feeling some shame and guilt because I started stealing quite a bit. I distinctly remember, like, tiptoeing through my parents' room in the night, while they were both sleeping. At that point, like, as an alcoholic, I'm insane, and I'd like started YouTubing videos of how to break into a safe, and I figured it out, and I'd go and break into the safe in the middle of the night. And I remember, like, for me, there was a lot of shame and guilt. Like, I hated what I was doing, but the relief of walking out of that room with the money that I needed was much more, that, okay, tomorrow or for this week, I'll be okay, and I should have known that. I suppose I did know that something was wrong with me at that point, but I think I was still in denial in the fact that I thought, at some point I'll probably get married and I'll stop, or whatever it is. I was dating someone at the time. It was my wife, the person that I ended up marrying. For me, like, I couldn't be in a relationship for longer than 3 or 4 months. It was all about, like, I present really well, and it was all about me presenting and creating this perfect person, but I couldn't keep up with that. There has to be a real element in a relationship, and I couldn't keep up with that. And within a couple of months, I'd inevitably leave out of fear of being exposed, And my wife is someone who kind of stuck around through that insanity, and my relationship was quite dysfunctional. A lot of possessiveness, I'd get jealous, and I mean, I wouldn't speak to her in a way that was okay. A lot of dysfunction there. Anyway, like, in those 2 years that I gave honors a full-time crack, at the end of 2015, I got married. It was insane, but at the time I thought, this is what I need to do. Like I said, like, everyone was just moving on with their lives. People were getting married. People started having families, or started, like, really just progressing in life. And I was still kind of stuck in my parents' house. I was about 26 years old. I was using ridiculous amounts. Like, at that point, my parents thought it was just gambling. My mom would come to, like, these gambling dens and, like, pull me out. It was a bit crazy. But I decided, let me get married and everything will be fine. This is when I'm going to stop, and I'm going to give honors a proper bash in my first year of marriage. Like, my dad said he'd kind of take care of me and Nabs in my first year, but I stayed with my parents, and that's when my using really got exposed. It's also when I started using my second drug of choice, and alcohol was ever present throughout. I mean, I had an amazing wedding. It was just this beautiful garden wedding, an amazing honeymoon. Like, I really felt like I had arrived again. I felt like it was a fresh start again as an alcoholic. Like, I thrive on fresh starts, and the first couple months of my marriage was okay. I was still using, but I was driving to Durbs every day for work, and I'd just use on the way. I mean, it just for a couple of months, until, like, no one, as much as my active was bad before getting married, it really got exposed when I got married, because then I had a wife that was living with me, and it didn't take long for her to see this insane lifestyle that I had, and I'd come home and I'd say I want alone time, and I'd kind of lock myself up in the room and use. I just wanted to be alone, and I just wanted to use. At that point, when I found my second drug of choice, it's supposed to be like this fun party drug, but at that point I was already at the point where all I wanted to be was just alone in my room. I had already started, I started working for the first time the year before as well, and I always said, like, I fuck up at university and stuff, sorry for swearing, but I'm going to be great at work, like, I have this talking ability, and, like, that's what I thought. I thought I could just bullshit and talk my way through life, I couldn't correlate hard work to success, and again, work, like, the first 2 or 3 months, I was like, the most productive. Like, I'm an accountant, so, like, I started doing my articles, and it was like the most productive 3 months, and like I really stood out, and then just fizzled out, you know, because I love fresh starts and I do really well, and then I don't have any consistency. And yeah, I mean, after I got married, it really got insane. You know, that's when I started. Maybe the using was less, because that's when I got caught out. My wife really, you know, she didn't know anything about this. As dysfunctional as our relationship was, she didn't know that I was drinking or using, you know. And when she found out, it was an absolute huge thing. My in-laws kind of got involved. It caused a lot of hatred, a lot of friction between the families. I held a lot of resentment in terms of the way my in-laws did handle it, because yeah, I mean, there were times where it wasn't okay, you know, like they'd come to my house at odd hours, like all of them, just put my parents under a lot of pressure. But at the same time, you know, like while I held on to that resentment, today I can see my part, you know. Anyway, the 3 years of marriage before coming into these rooms were absolutely insane. You know, I went to 6 treatment facilities. The first one was I went for this ibogaine treatment or something. You know, it's like just this trip that's supposed to like eradicate your subconscious or something and fix us. You know, it was absolutely insane. And I stayed sober for 6 months after that first treatment facility, and I can honestly say that those were the worst 6 months of my life. You know, because I didn't have a substance to take me away from my reality, and I didn't have a program. You know, at that point my wife was telling me about how she regrets marrying me. Like, I have no idea why she stuck around, and I'm really grateful for that. And you know, I was exposed to the family. You know, I had that feeling of self-consciousness, I had that feeling of worthlessness, that fear of people was already there, you know, and there was still a lot more active to come. And I was at the end where I really figured, you know what, like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do. Anyway, I relapsed at the end of the year, and in those 2 years, because I want to start talking about recovery.
20 minutes.
In those 2 years, like I was just in and out of treatment. I'd string together like 3 or 4 months of clean time, and then I'd have this insane, you know, 2 or 3 month relapse where literally the wheels would fall off. You know. At the end of 2017, when I relapsed, I went into a treatment facility that kind of introduced me to this program, you know, and when I first saw this program, like, I was really amazed at what people were doing, you know, and I could relate, and I felt like I wasn't alone, which was great, because at that point, I just thought that, you know what, there's really no hope for me. But I still thought I knew best, you know. I still wanted to intellectualize this program. I wanted to take parts of it and leave other parts that didn't suit me, you know. I wanted the easier, softer way, and it came with a lot of pain. You know, in 2017, I made an insane decision to leave work and just kind of study full time and give my honors another proper shot. You know, my parents, I just had this entitlement where they kind of took care of me. You know, my wife at that point, she had just finished studying, and she was like struggling to find a job. At that point, she had just finished some psychology honors degree or something, and she really put an effort. Like, I remember in that time that I was sitting at home, and I don't think I was using at that point, but I remember her putting in all this effort to like go and get a job, and all I was doing was like going to campus every day and like saying I'm going to campus, and then going to like the driving range and like sitting there for like 2 hours or 3 hours, and then sitting on my phone, and then eventually coming home, you know. And that period led to a relapse. In between that, like, my disease manifests in so many ways, you know. In between that, I had this online gaming addiction, you know, where I spent like so much of money just like buying weird shit as well for this game. This game also like had this chat where it was like people from all over the world, and like I felt like it made me escape my reality as well. Like, I could be on this chat room and escape my own reality and recreate myself. And that's what it's about for me as an alcoholic, you know. Like, I can't live in my reality, and that's what alcohol gives me. You know, I never understood that I have a living life problem until I came into this program now, you know, and that drinking was the solution to my problem. Anyway, like the relapses started happening like 2017, 2018, 2019. I don't want to go into too much of detail, but it was just like, you know, string together a few months of clean, coming to these meetings, absolutely no program, no step work, no sponsor, you know, a sponsor, but I'd be telling him what I wanted to do half the time, or what I think was a good idea for both of us to do. It was just insane. And the relapses kept coming, you know. Without a program, I can't, you know, like, I can't do this without a program. I can't function, I can't face life, I don't respond to life properly. You know, that fear is there, the anxiety is there, and it was all there, and eventually I'd relapse, and it would just be an absolute shit show, you know. In the end, like, I was stealing copious amounts of money. I was stealing from my wife. I started this hectic gambling addiction as well. There were times where I'd wake up in the middle of the night, like to tell her, like, babe, we have no money left. And it was just insane. Like, I have no idea how she stuck around. The support that my parents gave me, it wasn't always great, and like they didn't always handle it in the right way. And I suppose I did hold resentments towards that. But no one's perfect, and I can see my part now. It's about my behavior and what that caused. I can't judge other people for how they react if I'm behaving in a way where I'm, using drugs or being verbally abusive, and I've been physically abusive as well. I'm just going to quickly rush off to the end, to just the story before me coming into the treatment center, and then I want to talk about recovery for a bit. So I was clean for like 2 or 3 months, just another one of those things, and I just come back from a holiday with my in-laws. We had gone to Cape Town, and I relapsed on that holiday. Like I ruined everything, like I always managed to string together these 2 or 3 months clean, give hope to my wife, to my parents, make a million promises, The shame and guilt was huge as well, and I also really wanted to stop. It got worse and worse, and at some point I also said, I don't want this anymore. But I kept on relapsing, and so the night before coming into the treatment facility, the last treatment facility I went to, I was alone at home. It was a Friday afternoon for the first time in like 3 or 4 weeks. I just come off a relapse, and like I was just feeling a bit edgy, and I thought, let me just go and open the safe, and it was like, it's so insane now when I look at it, like I just couldn't be alone. And I opened the safe, and there was like something unusual about the safe that day, but I took a little bit of money, and then my folks came home, my wife came home. I had moved to Durban, alone with my wife at some point during all of this, which was insane as well. But at that point, after the relapse, my parents had brought me home. And my parents came home, and my wife came home, and I told them, I'm going for a meeting. And I was driving to this meeting, and I distinctly remember I was at this corner, and it was right to go to the meeting and straight to go and use, and I had this money that I'd stolen from the safe, and I swear, every fiber in my body wanted to turn right. I did not want to use. I was in that autopilot mode, and I just drove and I used. At that point, I had a PI, I had a tracker on my car. I knew I was screwed. When I got home, my parents' car wasn't there. They got home like 5 minutes afterwards, absolutely frantic. My mom was shrieking and screaming. She had checked the safe. They had actually like set a trap in the safe, so they knew, because before like I could get away. And my wife was just bawling her eyes out, like my mom said, just call her mom and tell her to just tell her to leave and tell her to come and take her away. And I remember like my wife bawling her eyes out, and I'm looking at her, and this wasn't the first time a situation like this happened, like I'm just summarizing it because I need to stop talking about active now, but it was just exactly how it was each time, and she's bawling her eyes out, and I'm looking at her, and I do love her, like, a part of me does love her, definitely, and all I could think about at that moment was, like, the stuff I had in my pocket, that's all I could think about, that's all I wanted to do. I couldn't connect to the moment, my dad was just, like, at that point where he didn't give a shit anymore. When my brother found out, I distinctly remember the last word, before coming in here, like, my brother just, like, told my parents, just fucking kick him off onto the streets, and he told my wife, just take your life and run, and the next morning I used in this dark room. My folks slept outside my room that day, and I just used the whole night, and I woke up in the morning, and I had like a little bit of a fight left in me, where I said, I'm not coming to treatment, and I'm going to call my lawyer. And my lawyer was my mother-in-law's best friend, my mother-in-law flippin' hated me. But as an addict, like, I just, it's just insane how I think. And I managed to convince my PI, because, we're manipulative people, that I need to use one more time, and I got something, and I used about, 10 minutes before coming in. And I remember after I'd used, I went to the bathroom and used, and my folks just went to the shops to go and get me some stuff. And this guy turned around and looked at me and said, like, why the fuck do you do this? Like, there's not even a difference in your behavior. And at that point, everything had stopped. The alcohol stopped working, the drugs stopped working. And there was nothing left, And when I came into this program, I was fortunate to spend time in a treatment facility that gave me this program, that instilled it in me and showed me my reality, and I'm forever grateful for that, and obviously it's this program that I was given, and it saved my life. I came into that treatment facility thinking, there's absolutely no chance At that point, I had seen the best psychologist, the best psychiatrist, the best medication, tried religion, tried absolutely everything, and I was convinced that there was nothing that could save me, and I didn't want to live anymore. I couldn't live like that, where every day was just a nightmare. I couldn't face people, I couldn't have a conversation with anyone. I really, there was nothing left. But still, I'm insane, and I have this disease, and I went in there thinking, you know what, I just need to quickly, do a short stay here, and I need to go out, and I need to sort out my life. I need to get my career back on track, and I need to, sort out my marriage because my wife's gone now, and I need to sort this out and that out. And I'm so grateful that I was given my reality there, where I could finally just surrender to this program. I was told that I need a leap of faith, that I need blind, absolute obedience to come into this program. And at that point, I saw people with this disease that were recovering, and living lives that I thought were, beyond possibility. And that's when I said, you know what, if someone can do this, if someone can live this normal life free from alcohol and drugs, and be a functioning human being, I was at that point of desperation where I said, you know what, tell me what to do and I'll do it. And that's my experience of how I have to come into this program. And the stuff, the results of that has been things beyond my wildest dreams. I stayed in this treatment facility for as long as I needed to kind of, I opened up the step working guide from our sister fellowship. That was an absolutely amazing experience for me. The times that I had spent in these rooms, I thought, you know what, literature is not going to fix me. Writing stuff on a page is not going to fix me. I know I have a problem, but can you guys help me stop using, and I'll fix everything else. I didn't know that the answer to all of my problems were in this program, and that was an amazing experience. Step one was absolutely amazing for me. I always knew what step one was, and I could, in my head say, yeah, I know I'm powerless, but actually just pouring my heart and soul into my step work and seeing how powerless I am, seeing how my best thinking always got me to that relapse, to that couch where I hated life and I didn't want to live, I didn't want to bath, I didn't want to do anything, and I'd have these amazing plans, and eventually I'd always end up back on that couch, where I'd hurt everyone around me. I couldn't deal with the shame and guilt. I couldn't deal with facing my reality, and that was always the case, and it's always because Zubair the alcoholic wanted to do it his way, but after step one, it was quite easy for me. I'm not going to lie. Recovery hasn't been easy, and living with the disease of addiction isn't easy, but when you have a program, it's amazing. But after step one, and after seeing that I have this disease, and how powerless I am, it was easy for me to then surrender to this program. For a long time, I tried to intellectualize this program and see how what I put in is going to give me what I desired. But when I stopped questioning, and I just kind of had that honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, just to kind of give it everything and surrender to this program, that's when I really started experiencing the results that the winners were experiencing. The other thing is, I was told to stick with the winners, and for the first time in my life, coming into recovery this time, that's what I did. All the suggestions that came to me for a long time, when I came into recovery this time, when I was desperate, those suggestions were easy. They weren't always easy, and sometimes I got a suggestion that didn't make sense to me, but I stopped questioning. I stopped questioning, and letting go of that and surrendering was the most amazing experience. Doing the steps and connecting to a higher power was absolutely amazing. I had a very funny relationship with the higher power my entire life. It was more fear-based, or my prayers were more based on kind of stuff that I needed, materialistic things that would give me affirmation and approval. And also, like I said, having a relationship with a higher power that was more fear-based, and through this program, finding a higher power that was loving and caring, a higher power that I can hand my insanity over to, a higher power that I can have faith and trust in, and in the beginning it was hope, but it's slowly becoming faith and trust, that blind absolute obedience, that key was just absolutely important for me. Step 4 and 5 were absolutely amazing as well. Step 5 was the most freeing experience. I thought I had spent so much of time talking to psychologists, and at that point, I was honest, I thought I was honest, where I thought, I'm going to tell them all my stuff because I need a solution, But in my step 5, it was something amazingly different. I had a higher power present there as well. I emphasize the higher power thing because I spent 2 years in this program not understanding the higher power element or questioning it. And that has been absolutely amazing for me, finding that relationship with the higher power. And step 5 was amazing in that it was my sponsor and my higher power present, you know. And I did have that pink cloud moment. I know it's different for different people, but I really had like an amazingly freeing experience in my step 5. I remember reading these stories in the big book where like people would describe, you know, their experiences after step 5, and some had like a higher power element to it. And I remember like in the house, everyone was talking about this amazingly spiritual game of football that they played, and everyone was serene and calm. And I was like, shit, how did I miss this? Like, where the hell was I when this amazing game was happening? And then I realized, shit, I was doing my step 5. You know, like, for me, like, I stopped making things about coincidence. You know, like, I started seeing, like, I heard that, you know, most people want to see to believe, you know, but when you believe, you start seeing, and that's my experience. My sponsor has been absolutely huge in my recovery as well. You know, like after treatment, I came out and I'd speak to my sponsor every day. You know, like in the beginning, I was stuck in my head, and I just hand over everything to my sponsor. I'm so grateful to my sponsor. He's so patient and tolerant. Couldn't be here today, but yeah, I owe a lot to him. You know, and I listen to my sponsor to the best of my ability. In the beginning, I didn't have a job coming out. It was all about faith and trust. You know, coming out, it was about faith and trust, doing the next right thing. My recovery hasn't been perfect at all. You know, I've gotten stuck in my head. My behavior has gone off at times. I've had dishonesties that I eventually have to go and expose to my sponsor. You know, I get, like, things will be going great, and I'll still look at the negative in my life. You know, but when I am working this program, when I get up in the morning and I genuinely surrender my will to a power greater than myself, you know, and to the best of my ability, I try to do the next right thing. You know, I try to practice that next spiritual principle, which is difficult for me as an alcoholic. You know, I want to emphasize the fact that recovery hasn't been, because there's been so much of amazing things that have happened in my recovery. Like, I have an absolutely amazing relationship with my family. My relationship with my wife hasn't always, like, the first couple months after coming out of treatment, it was great, you know, when I am working a program, but I started getting stuck in my head about things in my relationship, kind of looking at the dysfunctionality of my relationship, how, you know, it kind of went into marriage. I don't look at the amazing things that my wife has done and the amazing things we do have. But I started getting stuck in my head about that, and my behavior started getting not okay, you know. And I kind of kept it from my sponsor until my wife called him and said, you know what, like, this is verbal abuse and this is what's going on. And that happened over the last 2 months. And when that dishonesty was exposed to my sponsor, it's like, as long as when I start believing that there's a problem in my life that this program can't fix, that's when I have a problem. You know, so today I've written a little mini step 4. I'm going to go up and see my sponsor. He's here in Scottsboro. And I'm going to go and try and work on it. You know, I've got to work this program, and I've got to look at me. The other thing that the step work gave me is I finally started seeing my part in stuff. I spent so much of time blaming situations, blaming people, blaming my mom's controlling nature, blaming my wife for something, or, you know, my situation, blaming that and thinking, oh, you know, if I had this or if I had that, I wouldn't use. And recovery in this program has given me the ability to look at myself, you know, to look at my part. And it's difficult sometimes, you know, sometimes it's difficult, it's not perfect, but when I'm looking at my part, when I'm seeing what I can change, when I'm following that serenity prayer, when I'm handing it over to the higher power, like, the promises that were read, I promise you, I've experienced every single promise, you know, and that's absolutely amazing. But I believe that I would, you know, when I saw other alcoholics who were living this great life do it, and I was desperate enough to say, you know what, I've tried absolutely everything, you know, I'm tired of hurting the people around me. I've just got to give this my all, you know, this is my saving grace. I did it like it was, like my life depended on it, and the results have been absolutely amazing. You know, like, yeah, I mean, I don't want to talk for too much longer, but yeah, recovery has been absolutely amazing. You know, things beyond my wildest dreams have happened. I've made big decisions where I've kind of changed careers. Like, I'm in a job that I absolutely love now, you know, like, I wouldn't say it's my exact passion, but nothing's perfect, you know. It's a job that I wake up every morning and I enjoy doing, as opposed to the insanity. I didn't even talk about, like, my insanity at work. Obviously, there's a lot of active and a lot of the insanity that I haven't spoke about, but we all know that insanity. You know, the point here is that this program works, you know, like, the main thing for me was that blind absolute obedience, that desperation to follow a suggestion, you know, and this year has been the most amazing year of my life. There have been times where I felt completely serene, you know, and that's most of the time, if I must be honest with you, when I am working this program. You know, it's given me, when I say things beyond my wildest dreams, it's kind of my interactions with other people, my connection with life, you know. And yeah, I mean, it's about faith and trust, you know, and it's not, every day is not perfect, and I get stuck in my head sometimes, but you know, I'm clean and I'm sober, and I know it'll be okay. You know, this too shall pass. So yeah, thanks for letting me share, guys.